What's up, everybody? I am back with a new movie review. Now, this isn't technically animated because January is usually I put out a lot of animated films for review, but this still falls in line. This is a biopic on the uh, life of Walt Disney, leading up to the point of his creation of Mickey Mouse. So we do technically get some elements of animation here, so I want to count it. And besides, Walt Disney is kind of like I want to say he's like the father of animation, but he built a massive empire on animation, namely Mickey Mouse. Uh, but before I continue, please leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys think of. I don't know if you ever saw the biopic. I highly encourage you guys to check it out. It's free on Amazon Prime, and it's part of it came out in 2015, so it's technically the most recent-ish biopic on Walt Disney. Prior to that, there's a documentary that came out in 2001 about him. This one caught my eye first. I didn't even realize about the 2001 version, but I preferred to check out this one since it's the more updated telling. Yeah, follow me on links in the description below, like my YouTube and my Twitch channel, where I review, react, and play video games, stream video games for the channel. And hit that like button, as YouTube's been having some issues with the like button system, so I want to make sure that is working properly. Do me that huge favor. Anywho, this was directed by Keoa Lee. Don't know if this is probably like the only thing. Pretty sure it was she. Cause it sounds like her name. Cause this person primarily did like indie stuff or small budgeted things. And apparently, he was brought in the last minute to direct this. The budget was pretty doggone low, like at $568,000. So don't know if it did, well in terms of returns. But it stars Thomas Ian Nicholas as Walt Disney, John Heder as Roy Disney, Armando Gutierrez as Iwerks, David Henry as Rudy Ising, Taylor Gray plays Fritz Furling, Jodie Sweetin as Charlotte Disney, Hunter Gomez as Hugh Harmon, Ayla Kell as Bridget, Kate Kasman as Lillian Disney, Arthur L. Bernstein as Frank Newman, Frank Lecari as George Winkler, Connor Duman as Charles Mintz, Florida Bonfanti as Margaret Winkler, Brianna Coleman as Ruth Disney, Beatrice Tavares as Virginia Davis, Laura Lee Thompson as Dawn Paris, Natasha Sherritt as Edna Disney, Timothy Williams as Fred Harmon, Sheena Collette as Desi, Randy Molnar as Uncle Robert Disney, Don Lemkin as Elias Disney, and Nancy J. Barber as Flora Call Disney. Now, I can't help but think about the that movie I did. What was it? Saving Mr. Banks, which has Tom Hanks, who played as a not old, but honestly, like a little bit after his 40s Disney, who's pretty much already a fully established person who has this big park at this point, already world renowned, who's trying to get the rights to Mary Poppins to bring it to the adaptation from the books to film screen. But ever since I saw that movie, I always wanted to know, like, okay, there got to be a biopic about Walt Disney. It'd be kind of weird, after all this time, it hasn't. Turns out there's two, but like I said, I'm only talking about the 2015 version. And I can't help but, as we see the young Walter, always had an interest not only in animation or cartoons or drawing, but also with animals. He always got into trouble drawing on the side of his father's barn, who had owned a farm for a bit. And I can't help but think about the dialogue in Saving Mr. Banks at the end, where he tells Miss Travers about how his father kind of hit him with a belt for certain, not doing his work, pretty much. And I kind of see that kind of popping off here. It didn't actually show it, but you can tell that he probably would have that kind of father in this point in time in his, upbringing. And I wouldn't hesitate to put belt to ass for, not for legit reasons, but just like, trying to, get his boy, like, that is just the solution to any kind of misbehavings. As he got older, getting into his teens, he wanted to get into acting, but his father was vehemently against it, often getting busted him and a friend trying to act on stage. But once this is a little bit after the farm was sold and they moved away to Kansas City, and he, got a little older. After coming home from the Red Cross, he wanted to pursue his passion in cartooning, which he did eventually get a job at Pesman Rubin Commercial Arts Studio, where he met Iwerks. But that didn't last long. After a couple of weeks, they were eventually let go because, money wasn't there. So Walt had an idea for them to go into business on their own, because he didn't work for others who had little vision. So he started, making brought in a few animators that they knew in this barn, which they started working out of a barn, but eventually, because they started off with the title Iwerks Disney Commercial Artist, but eventually Fred and Hugh Harmon joined up with them. But trying to build a brand of their own. But the major issue of the plot, or not the plot itself, but within the story that Walt was dealing with, is finances. Come to realize that he is just which is, it's very telling, considering how Disney, the Disney studio is now. is the fact that uh, there wasn't like a good cohesion, because Walt is pretty much the idea creative spot. He did not realize, okay, because he thought he can do everything, but he can't. It was, coincide with going with Disney right now is the fact that they don't have like a good cohesion or a good symbiosis between the creative side and the business side, and that comes to a detriment to a lot of companies if they don't have like a good symbiosis between who's the money people and who's the creative people. They gotta work in tandem with one another. One cannot overpower the other, pretty much overstepping. But Walt clearly is a visionary. I wouldn't classify him as like a perfectionist, but he had a few growing pains he has to go through, and he really wanted to push out the Alice cartoon, live action cartoon thing he wanted to do. And as I did my review of the Alice in Wonderland animated film, he eventually had to like give up on that whole live action Alice and just go eventually into full blown animation. Was probably like the better idea. But he run into trouble with trying to pay his animators and pay his own doggone rent. He eventually it gotten so bad where he had to, I mean, the colleagues stuck around as long as they could, but it even tried to help him out, trying to, throw a little cash his way in order to, get his rent paid for the month, just to carry him over, because they truly believe in, specifically iWorks, but the others believe for a while, but like, the problem is that they had lives to live. They had their own rents to pay and stuff like that. And kudos to them for lasting as long as they did, hanging there as long as they did. But you can understand their point of view. Like, even back then, how currency was in the U.S. back in like the 20s, what would be cheap today was crazy expensive back then. And they eventually, some of them had to go find work elsewhere because they got to put food on their own table. So eventually Walt was put out on had to basically put out on the street eating out of garbage. He ends up having to befriend a mouse in his own studio, which you would think that would have been like the moment he came up with the idea of Mickey Mouse, or at least the idea was planted, but no, it won't come until later. So he didn't want to go run into his parents, given the fact that his father didn't really. If his father wouldn't want him to go into like acting, he definitely probably wouldn't have supported any of this stuff. And which is kind of a tale as old as time for the most part, where people who have like a dream and a goal that isn't stable, it is kind of frowned upon, or they get mocked, or just won't believed in. Usually in these kind of stories, it's like the parents. What I learned from one of my acting teachers in Chicago is obviously continue the dreams, obviously audition and all this other stuff, but you gotta still make sure you got like a good paying job so you can have a home to stay in while you're pursuing all this stuff, because there's a happy medium, which uh, I'm pretty sure it probably came about in these guys' minds back then when they were young dudes, but I'm not sure how many people was hiring at that time, considering would have been around the Great Depression, because I think the Great Depression was around like the 20s. Uh, uh, yeah, no. Actually, the Great Depression was around like was started in 1929 through 1939. So this would have been around. Well, Walt was really like run through some problems. Would have been like a few years prior to the Great Depression really popping off. So he ends up having to call his brother, who early on we see, fighting tuberculosis. Which every time I think about that disease, I can't help but think about Arthur Morgan in Red Dead Redemption, because he like died from tuberculosis. But that was during the Old West, which uh, uh, is only probably uh, 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 a decade or two. Well, I don't know what like the games like. Uh, uh, wow, he was 36 when he. That was a strong 36, but it was the old West. Live hard. So he, in the game, he would have died in 1989. So this was in like the early 20s. Uh, so like yeah, a handful of decades. So through that course of that time, they would have found some cure for the tuberculosis at that time. Still suffering from the effects, but it wouldn't necessarily be like a death sentence, around in Roy's supposed maybe mid to late 20s, possibly early 30s at that time. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure when he what age he was when he contracted that. But he ends up calling him. He still, though, like, because he was at a veterans hospital uh, being treated, but he has some money to lend to Walt. All the while, Walt having to go all the way to Los Angeles to stay with his uncle Disney and his wife. So he ends up getting an idea to send a letter. He didn't know how to use a typewriter, ironically. So his aunt having to help him type up a letter he sent to what would be the Winklers, uh, who was like a big animation studio at the time, producing like the old black and white silent cartoons. Uh, of course, the husband, we learn he's a sleaze bag to a certain extent, because he was business. He's a business guy. They at first things looks all good. They enjoyed the Alice shorts and all that other stuff, so they want to like throw him some funds. He brings back all his previous crew to Los Angeles so they can reestablish their business. But still, uh, uh, will eventually start running into money troubles. He eventually meets up with be his future wife. And he brought in Roy to help out with the business side of things. But Winkler wanted to, the husband wanted to just completely buy him out from what I saw on the contract, like $200 kind of like a budget, like kind of not like a full payout in one lump sum, but kind of like a you know every so often $200 and what have you, which at that time would have been a lot of money. But Walt wasn't, willing to give up what he felt like was his right, because they was also working on the Oswald Rabbit thing, which I'm pretty sure would have been like the precursor to Bugs Bunny. Oswald walks so Bugs Bunny can run. Winkler ends up sending his brother-in-law, was George, to pretty much spy on them, but it's like supervised. And he ends up trying to break up the team. One of them ends up buying into it, and what we find out in the end, he tried to start his own little studio. Wasn't obviously as big as Walt Disney's, but he had some level of success. But kudos to, he had like a true blue wife, because eventually he did get married in 2020. It's not 2020. 1925. Walt got married to Lillian. Who, you talk about, like, you want a wife like this who truly believes in her man's mission. She saw something with him. We rarely get that with guys. Rarely get that with girls nowadays. Rarely, which is sad. Which is because I'm not saying like he was all talk. Obviously, Walt Disney was never all talk. I'm not talking about those guys. I'm talking about the guys who is like, putting in the work, but the lady understands that this takes time. But I'm not gonna, but I see his vision, I see him putting in work, I see the skills, I see all this stuff. I'm not getting off this ride because I see this train going somewhere. Her and Iwerks was like, like I trusted him. While everybody else is like quitting because fair enough, they need to be paid. But he eventually tells the Winkler guy to shove it, and he came back, and what's left of the team, they end up coming up with the idea of what initially would have been known as Mortimer Mouse, but the wife didn't much care for that name, and I think a lot of us would have agreed that Mortimer sounds kind of lame. It's like Mortimer Mouse probably wouldn't have sold all that well. You wanted like a friendly character, it needs a friendly name. So they was going through a bunch of M words until they came up with Mickey. Mickey was very much like a pleasant sounding name. And then he made some off-brand comment, and it's like, maybe we'll give him a girlfriend. And of course, events not too long later, they would have come up with Minnie Mouse. So that's when they, start with the first Mickey Mouse short, Playing Crazy, which highly recommend you look it up and check it out online. You might get a kick out of it. And while his family was there and a bunch of friends and other colleagues, with the saw Playing Crazy in the theaters, it had rave reviews at that time, and this led to making big bucks for Disney, which he then started putting like the funds where it needed to be to build off the brand. Oh, which by the way, it started with like Disney Brothers when he brought in Roy, but in order to make sure they don't take the name, he wanted to make it just call it Walt Disney, because can't take any kind of rights off my name kind of thing. So he then, like, as they leave in the theater, he spies and saw his lost mouse back again. Like, who knows that's the same mouse anymore. And he looks at it pleasingly as the credits roll, and we see like what happened with all the people involved. His wife, eventually, made this kind of Disney amphitheater or orchestra or something like that. Some a big kind of stadium where they played music and so forth. We know that Freeze and Rudy will eventually go on to create, found Warner Brothers, and eventually create like the Looney Tunes. So the Hugh Harman and Fred Harman, the one who tried to like work with Winkler, started his own comic. It was a comic strip called The Red Rider. He drew for 25 years, reached 40 million readers through 750 newspapers. So he has some success, but Disney has always looked at the bigger one, became like the bigger one. But you can argue him and Fritz and Rudy and Hugh were, in terms of Warner Bros. And Disney, these two were pretty much neck and neck in success. Where maybe Disney, or not really maybe, Disney definitely over time probably got maybe like a slight edge over the Warner Brothers stuff, because of so many recognizable characters, and eventually the Disney company acquiring so many different IPs, as we know now in present day. Now, this didn't really do so well from what I'm understanding from critics, because how it's not necessarily the story, but it's just they kind of softballed, like, I guess, Disney's edgy stuff, that, like, they kind of how they put it, the decision to douse everything in a twinkly romanticized tone that probably struck the filmmakers as apropos for Disney's life, but in fact loses all that was spiky and determined about the man, which I can see his point, because given what I saw in like the epilogue of Saving Mr. Banks, yeah, there was some conniving edge to Disney, which in terms of a businessman or like that determined of a person, that seems kind of lost on this film, because given what he did with Mary Poppins, it's like, yeah, this dude probably would have done a lot of the same stuff with a lot of other things once he really made it big. because not everything was his own originally. He acquired a lot of other stuff that he just did whatever he wanted, and that doesn't really show here in this biopic. But personally, I still have some. I found some appeal to it. Like, how often would I revisit this? Probably not as much as I probably saw Saving Mr. Banks, because I thoroughly enjoy that one, where he is a tangentially a Disney biopic, but more so on P.L. Travers. But yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. Like I said, it's on Amazon Prime for free, so you can check it out and judge for yourself. Cause it's a pretty decent biopic, you know. Yeah, I agree with the criticism. They should have but the director was kind of brought in for a last minute kind of thing. He had never kind of done something this quote unquote monumentous. Did best he could, or she could. But yeah, could have been worse, honestly. And it's a tough road ahead of anybody who's trying to do a biopic about someone as monumental as Walt Disney. Like, I'm amazed this is like pretty as decent as it is. But anyway, I'm curious to know what you guys' thoughts are. Check it out, come back and leave a comment below and let me know what you guys think. And I will see you guys in a little bit for another movie review. Back to animation. So I will see you all soon. Peace.